Often inheritance tax planning, intergenerational planning, succession planning, often the tool that we will use is trusts. And I think until you start to look at succession planning, most people don't really have very much experience of trusts. So what is a trust and why do we use it? So a trust is a legal entity, much like an individual is a legal entity, much like a company is a legal entity. A trust is a separate legal entity. And one of the benefits of a trust is that a trust can survive, a trust can live for 125 years, which will tend to be longer than most people, but certainly will be longer than most generations. So with inheritance tax, it's levied at 40% on each generation. But your parents may be 30 years older than you are. Each generation comes within 30 years. So the 40% inheritance tax comes every 40 years. When you have assets that are held in trust, the trust can live for 125 years. So any assets that are held in trust won't be part of your personal estate for inheritance tax. Now, I'm conscious I'm sharing general information. It's very important to understand how trusts work. It's very important to understand your relationship with a trust. You may be the settler of the trust, the person who creates the trust and settles assets into it. You may be a trustee of a trust, the person who runs the trust, the person who makes the decisions about the trust assets. You may be a beneficiary of the trust, the person who benefits from the trust assets. Or you may be a combination of those things. And it's really important that you always understand the relationship between yourself and the trust, because that will have an impact on your ability to enjoy the assets. It will have an impact on whether or not you have responsibility for managing the assets, and it will have an impact on how your estate and the trust are taxed. Um, but one of the main reasons that we use trusts is because they have that longevity. So trusts are a very protective environment because you can put assets in trust, you can appoint trustees who will manage the assets, and you can appoint beneficiaries who benefit from the assets, which means if you have a beneficiary who perhaps is vulnerable, or a beneficiary perhaps they're very young and may not be able to make financial decisions, you can appoint people who have more experience, people who would make smarter financial decisions to run the trust, to manage the assets for the benefit of the person who may be vulnerable or may be young or may not have experience with making financial decisions. So a trust is a very protective environment. But because a trust survived for 125 years, when it comes to intergenerational estate planning, it can also be a very tax efficient environment. It's very important that we understand how we use trusts and how they're taxed. In other countries, such as in America, it might be more common you build your estate, you build significant wealth, maybe you build your £10 million, and then you put your estate in a trust. And in America, there are no negative tax consequences to that. In the UK, the rules are very, very different. In the UK, an individual can only put £325,000 into a trust. If they put more than £325,000 into a trust, they will have an immediate tax to inheritance tax at the lifetime rate, which is 20%. So you can't build your £10 million estate and then put it in trust and hope that the trust will take care of all of your succession challenges. You have to work with trusts, sometimes working with trusts for many, many years to be able to get the most benefit from them. And when we understand how trusts work, when we understand how they're taxed with assets going in, with assets coming out, but also how they're taxed over time with the assets that they hold, we can then use trusts in a strategic way in our planning. So if you're an individual who is building generational wealth, you have assets, you'll have certainly income generating assets. You may have a range of different types of investments, whether they're financial investments, property, businesses, or a range of different things. And now you need to think about how you can use trusts, how you can work with trusts over time to get the benefit of the trust, to get the assets out of your personal estate into the trust in such a way that your family will be able to benefit in the way that you want them to benefit, and working tax efficiently within the trust tax regime. Now, if you don't know what trusts are, if you don't know how they're taxed, if you don't know the relationship they have with individuals and families, then you're not in a position today to be able to use a trust or to be able to think strategically about how you build your finances when you could benefit from including trusts in that planning. And again, this is the benefit of working with professionals. As a professional who works in succession, we use a lot of trusts. We work with trusts all the time, and we understand how we can work with trusts to help a family to mitigate inheritance tax. We understand how we can work between the individual who is holding the wealth and the trust and the family to be able to um, get value into a trust over many years, and then work with the trust as it holds the assets and as it benefits the family over many years. So it really is important to get that education and It really is important to understand the relationship you can build with an estate planner, because if you're working with trusts over the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years of your lifetime, then potentially into your children's generation, the relationship with your estate planner is going to be a vital one. Not just from a strategic point of view in terms of setting these things up, but also from a strategic point of view in terms of managing it year on year on year on year. And this is the benefit that we can bring to our clients. This is the benefit that we can bring to anybody who wants to build generational wealth. It really is about using the trusts in a strategic way as you build your wealth, thinking about how you want to benefit during your lifetime, and ultimately how you want your children, grandchildren, great grandchildren to benefit over time.